Hello, I'm Joerg and Dennis from Scene World, and we have the pleasure today to interview David Pleasance, who had many hats at Commodore, and his friend Nico Barbat, who we will address later. And we will talk a bit about the history of David, what he's known for, and what he's doing currently, as you can see here on the table. So David, you actually started out early on at Commodore. That was a very known company, especially for producing the Commodore 64, the most sold home computer ever. And you started out in marketing, I guess. So tell us a bit about your beginnings at Commodore.
Is that on? Yes, it is. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming to this little presentation. Yes, I had the very good fortune of joining Commodore. I joined Commodore in the UK in June of 1983. And they had just in the previous October launched the Commodore 64. So for me, it was the perfect time to join the company. I actually joined them as a salesman, and my role was to sell Commodore PETs, the early business machines before PCs. My role was to sell them into the retail market. And quite strangely, after a few weeks, Commodore announced that they were actually going to be dropping the Commodore PET line and bringing out new products. So in a way, I was recruited for no reason. But luckily for me, because the 64 was doing so well, I was then given the responsibility to look after all the national accounts. That's the big retail stores within the UK and selling to them and making sure that we did lots of business. As time progressed, I managed to introduce some different marketing ploys to Commodore. And the bottom line is that we ended up selling loads and loads and loads of 64s into every possible retail situation, including bookstores and chemist stores everywhere. Then we launched the Amiga 500 product, which obviously revolutionized the whole world of computing. And I guess in a way that's really how I made my reputation, because when we launched the Amiga 500, I don't know if you realize how difficult it is to market something which essentially is a piece of plastic with some keys on it. Anyway, what happened with the Amiga 500 was that, as I was saying, it's a piece of plastic with some keys on it. And that is a very difficult thing to market in any exciting way. So I came up with the idea of putting the computer into a bundle with all sorts of software, the latest and greatest games, obviously, because that's what people wanted, but also making sure we always had good productivity software in there as well, such as art packages and word processing and stuff like that. And the reason for doing that is that the parents can justify the purchase of the machine. So anyway, I negotiated a deal with them, but obviously this was a completely new idea. So I committed to only 10,000 pieces. But what I promised them was that we would do a pack that actually reflected their marketing of the Batman game. And the fact that there was an Amiga inside was almost incidental. Now, Ocean were very worried because they just paid out $1 million, and they anticipated it was going to cost them another $1 million to make the game. So their concerns were that they knew how many they needed to sell in order to get their money back, and they were obviously they wanted to sell more than that, and they were worried that my activity would influence those volumes. And as it happens, they sold 5 times their very highest estimate. So for them, it was a huge success for their own product. But more importantly, I did not take 10,000 pieces from them. I ended up taking 186,000 pieces, because that is how many Amiga 500 Batman packs we sold in 12 weeks. Anyway, after Commodore UK, I was promoted to general manager of Commodore Electronics Limited, which was the holding company for the whole group of Commodore, and that was based in Basel, Switzerland, and I was responsible for 35 countries. And I was there for 2 years, and then I moved to America. I was promoted to vice president of Commodore Inc., which was the sales company in America, and I was there for a year. And then ultimately I was returned back to the UK as managing director of the company where I first started. Now, those were very difficult times for Commodore because they were in their most serious financial trouble that they've ever been in. And one of the things, we launched the Amiga 1200 at that time, and then unfortunately my boss, the president of Commodore, insisted that we launch the Amiga CD32 about 7 or 8 months ahead of its scheduled launch date. I mean, I was totally against this because, first of all, I knew that we had no software ready for it. I had got development kits into all the major game software publishers in the UK and a couple in Europe, and they were developing software specifically to utilize all the extra features and benefits that the CD32 had to offer. So the fact that we had no proper software for it when we launched was always going to be a negative, because all that the software publishers did was to port their existing Amiga software and put it onto the CD32, which really was of no benefit. And obviously the clients didn't like that. But the other thing that I knew was going to be a negative was that we had got all our Amiga 1200s that were being manufactured. They were already pre-sold into the market, ready for Christmas. And I knew that launching the CD32 at the same time would impact those numbers, and it did. We sold a lot less 1200s than we had already got ordered. So the net result, of course, was that ultimately, no matter what we did, we couldn't save Commodore. They were in too much financial trouble, and they declared bankruptcy. Now, Commodore UK was the strongest Commodore subsidiary, and closely followed by Germany. Commodore Germany was just behind us in volume and turnover. But the Commodore UK, we managed to stay trading for 14 months after Commodore parent company went bankrupt. Anyway, I and my fellow managing director at Commodore UK, a guy called Colin Proudfoot, we tried to buy the worldwide assets of Commodore. And it's a long story which I won't bore you with, but the net result is that we got cheated out of it, and ESCOM bought Commodore. And as you all know, just over a year after they bought Commodore, ESCOM themselves went bankrupt. So it was a very bad purchase on Commodore's behalf. Anyway, that's my background with Commodore. So I was with them 12 and a half years, right until the very end. Certainly, I think I'm probably one of the longest serving employees that Commodore had. And I have to say, even though it was very difficult working for management who didn't really understand the business, I loved it, and I could not wait to get to work every day. It was just a fantastic job. Anyway, after that, I got out of the industry completely. I changed my life completely. I remarried, I moved abroad, different countries and so on. And then in 2015, I was invited to be a guest speaker at the very first ever Amiga reunion, which was held in Amsterdam, the Amiga 30. That was in 2015. And I was amazed to walk into that place and be swamped by people who come up and wanted to shake my hand and wanted a signature and a photograph. And I was completely blown away because it was a real shock to me after so many years.
Und im Jahr 2015 war er dann in Holland eingeladen für das erste Amiga-Meeting, und er war erstaunt zu sehen, dass es noch so eine aktive Community für den Amiga gibt.
Anyway, in 2019, after being at many events and doing speeches and so on, I was persuaded to write my story about Commodore, which, to be honest with you, I was very reluctant to do because I don't consider myself to be an author.
I think the next part of the interview will be talking about the books, right? Yeah.
Yes.
And that is also where Nico Barbat will come into play, because he's a publisher for books, actually.
Yes, just to explain that when this was released, which was actually in 2019, was the first time this was released. And what this book covers, it covers the whole of that time from 83 right through to the end. And there are chapters in here from many other people from within Commodore. This is definitely an inside story. It's not conjecture. For example, there is a chapter by Dave Haney, one of the engineers. There's a chapter by R.J. Michael, who was one of the designers of the Amiga 500. And also from Germany, Dr. Peter Kittel has a chapter. Some of you who know Commodore Germany probably know him. So anyway, we released this, we only released it only in English initially, and it sold very, very well. It is, even if I say so myself, it's a very interesting story, because you won't believe some of the mistakes and opportunities that were lost by the management of Commodore. In fact, this book is being used in many universities now as an example of how not to run a business.
Perhaps, Nico, introduce yourself a bit about who you are and how you are involved.
Hello, everyone. I'll make the story brief, as someone else is at the center. David is the main person here, and I'm just tagging along. I've been an Amiga journalist or technology journalist for 25 years now. I entered the scene around the time when David stopped, during the period when Escom bought Amiga. I became a professional journalist at that time. I was with Amiga Plus for a while, serving as the editor-in-chief for 5 years. It was a lot of fun, even when times were not so great. I then moved to Berta, to Bauer, working with various larger publishers. For the past 3 years, I've been somewhat back in the scene because Amiga has always held a special place in my heart, just like for those of you sitting there who are interested. It has been such a cool system. We see a lot happening in the scene, especially regarding new hardware and software developments. There is real life in it. It's really enjoyable to see that something significant is happening here, exactly as I am. Last year, with a friend I've known for ages, an old colleague who I know from working together at Amiga Plus, we founded a small publishing house because of Monkey Island. In Germany, there was only one other publisher focusing on these topics, and we worked closely with them. We have a joint booth over there, and we've built up our small publishing program. We first made a book about Monkey Island, then about Valhalla, an art book developed in collaboration with Ubisoft. And now, 2 books by David Pleasance have been added. We have just released them in the German market to help David get into the trade with the books. So if you want to buy the book, you can get it everywhere at Amiga dealers, on Amazon, and of course here at our booth. I would be delighted if you come to us, talk to us, because exchange is the best thing that can happen to us in communicating.
It's important to mention that your booth is called Look Behind You so that people can find you.
No. I would say now let's talk a bit about some stories of the book, some teasers perhaps.
Yeah, but we got enough time because I've got a lot to talk about with the new series of books. So up to you. Yes, I mean, this for example, I'll give you one example of an opportunity that Commodore had that they blew. I was asked by the guys at Psygnosis. You probably know that name, a very, very highly regarded publisher of software games. And they asked me to take my boss, Mehdi Ali, up to them. They wanted to talk to him. I didn't know what they wanted to say, but I took him up there. So when we arrived, Ian Hetherington, who was one of the co-directors, he was the technical guy at Psygnosis. And he started to, remember, I've already given these guys development machines so that they could make software for the CD32.
Pardon?
Ian Hetherington, his name, yeah. So Ian started to tell Mehdi, he said, look, Mehdi, I've looked at this technology, he said, and I've realized that if you make this little change and you add that and you do this and you do this, you will end up with a much, much better product. Now, obviously, Mehdi Ali was not a technical person, and most people would say, look, this sounds really interesting, but I'm not the right person to talk to. How about I get Dave Haney or one of our engineers to contact you and you give them information? That would be fantastic. But Mehdi Ali was, well, the only word I can think of, he was an imbecile, and he thought he was being talked down to, and he got very angry. I had to drag him away. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is because not long after that, Psygnosis got bought by Sony, and not long after that, Ian Hetherington himself was made head of Sony PlayStation Europe. He was offering us the technology that PlayStation ultimately used, and because of Mehdi Ali's ignorance, we missed out on it. We just walked away from it.
I didn't quite get that.
He offered us that technology that went into PlayStation, and because Mehdi, the way he was, I took him away from it. We lost that opportunity. It was being offered to us for free.
Ah, exactly. Okay. For the PlayStation.
Okay, now the real reason I'm here is because we were asked so many times, would we do a German translation of the book? Because not everybody can read English, of course. And so in 2021, I ran a Kickstarter inviting people to back us doing the German book. At the same time, by coincidence, I was convinced to do another book, which is this one here, which I'll come on to in a moment. But I did Kickstarters to both of them, and then later on that following year, I was quite ill, and I was in hospital, and I ended up losing about 3 months of productivity, which meant I missed the printing deadline for 2022, and so therefore these books have only just come out. This one came out in German. It's only been about 3 or 4 weeks. We actually had this book here. Now, this book, when this arrived earlier than that one, and I shipped them all from the UK, and it was an absolute nightmare because the UK is no longer in EU. Now, what this book is, the title of this book is From Vultures to Vampires. And what it is, this is a book that covers all of the things that happened to Commodore's patents, logos, IPs, and trademarks after ESCOM, because there were vultures all coming in trying to get a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And the reason we called it From Vultures to Vampires was because at that time, the very latest technology was the vampire coming from the Apollo guys. So it was a perfect title, and the idea was it would be one book that covered the whole of that time. So then what happened was that we realized that we'd filled this much of the book, and we'd only covered the time from 95 to 2004. So we were forced then into writing volume 2. Now, volume 2 was coming out at the same time as this one, but when we reached 550 pages on volume 2, we realized we needed a volume 3 as well. Now that brings me very nicely back to Nico, because after us trying to ship these, I decided I need somebody already in Europe to do all the distribution outside of the UK, and that's how I contacted Nico. So this German version was ready to be printed, and so was this ready to be printed. So we actually jointly published them. It made perfect sense to do that, and I'm really pleased because I've got a partner in Nico and his company. They're absolutely fantastic, very ethical people. They do a great job, and I'm thrilled to bits that I've got a partner in Germany that works with us.
With the business that is Nico Barbert, but say something about it yourself.
The German book is already available for purchase. The second part is also available. The third part is upcoming now. Not at print anymore, but already available.
Now, just to update you, Volume 3 is actually printed and it's literally on its way to us. I should take bulk delivery of it end of September. I'm pretty certain it'll be. He'll probably get it a few days before me. But anyway, the fact of the matter is that all of these books are available through Nico in Germany and other parts of Europe and the rest of the world. He ships everywhere outside of the UK because it makes perfect sense to do that. These books, this one is the German version. We do have an English version. I don't have it here with me, but you can order it through us. And please come and get one of these, which will give you details about the reaches. This book has also been translated and published in Italian. It is currently being translated in Polish. So our stand is very close by, about less than 1 minute's walk. If you'd like to buy something, I'll happily sign it for you. If you'd like to bring anything Commodore Amiga related, I'll sign it for you. And I'll be very happy to have a chat with you personally anyway.
I think that would be all. Are there any questions, perhaps?
Yeah.
Hi, I want to say thank you for your important contribution to the tech world, and also now your important contribution to preserving its history. So thank you for the books. I am curious, when Commodore was at its highest, or maybe also before its bankruptcy, was there any long-term vision of where Commodore would have been in the future, and where do you think Commodore would have been today if it was still around?
Well, to be honest with you, I realized very, very quickly when I joined Commodore in June of '83, as I told you, I was recruited to sell pets to the retail market. But I realized that after a couple of months that when they told me that they weren't going to have any pets, Commodore never, ever had any kind of business plan.
Anybody else, or no questions? No? Okay, well, then thanks for your attention and listening to it, and enjoy further the weekend at Gamescom.
Thank you. Have a nice Saturday.
Thank you so very much, everybody. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Please come and talk to me. I don't bite, unless you ask me to.